Have you ever wondered how the world's biggest engineering projects come to life or fail spectacularly? From billion-dollar megastructures to shocking construction disasters, we uncover the stories behind the world's most ambitious projects. In the heart of Boston, nestled amidst its iconic skyline, lies a story of ambition, innovation, and failure. A tale that began with dreams of revolutionizing the city's infrastructure only to become one of the most infamous and costly construction projects in U.S. history. This is the Big Dig, once hailed as the most ambitious transportation project in America. Conceived with the intention of transforming Boston's aging roadways and reducing its notorious traffic congestion, the Big Dig promised to reshape the city for generations to come. But what began as an exciting vision for progress quickly became embroiled in delays, skyrocketing costs, and a web of controversy that would haunt the city for decades. At the outset, this $2.6 billion project was expected to revolutionize how people moved through Boston. But as the years passed, the costs surged, ultimately surpassing $14.6 billion. Along the way, the Big Dig would face engineering challenges, political battles, corruption, and even tragedy. So, what went wrong? What happened to this monumental project? In this deep dive, we'll uncover the shocking truth behind the Boston Big Dig, its engineering hurdles, political intrigue, and lasting impact on the city's skyline. Stay with us as we unravel the mystery of America's most expensive construction mistake. In the 1980s, Boston's streets were a constant symbol of urban chaos. The city's aging infrastructure, with its sprawling highways cutting through neighborhoods, was a far cry from the modern, livable city that planners and citizens alike envisioned. Traffic congestion was not just an inconvenience, it was a daily reality that stifled the city's growth and quality of life. The Big Dig was conceived as a bold solution to these problems. Its vision was simple but transformative: bury the major highways that divided Boston, freeing up space for parks, pedestrian-friendly areas, and more vibrant, accessible neighborhoods. The Big Dig was more than just about traffic flow, it was about redefining the city. By removing the elevated roads and pushing them underground, we could reconnect neighborhoods that had been separated for decades. The idea was to create an urban landscape that was not only more efficient but also more pleasant for residents and visitors alike. The project's goals went beyond transportation. It was about creating a more sustainable, pedestrian-friendly environment. At its heart, the Big Dig was a vision of Boston as a city where people could thrive, not just drive. By expanding green spaces, reducing air pollution, and reclaiming land for community development, the project sought to bring a new kind of urbanism to one of America's oldest cities. The Big Dig promised a better, greener, and more sustainable future. It was about reclaiming space for the people, connecting the city's past with its future, and transforming Boston into a model of modern urban living. But this vision, as grand as it was, came at a price. The road from concept to reality would prove far more complicated and costly than anyone could have anticipated. As the Big Dig moved from vision to reality, the challenges quickly began to pile up. What was supposed to be a revolutionary engineering feat was already showing signs of trouble. What was initially projected as a $2.6 billion project is already facing significant delays and rising costs. Concerns are growing over whether the Big Dig will ever meet its ambitious promises. At the start, officials reassured the public that the project was well-planned and under control. But as construction began, reality proved far more complicated. Costs soared, deadlines were missed, and what seemed like small setbacks began to snowball into major issues. One of the first major red flags was the complexity of building underground in one of America's oldest cities. Beneath Boston lay a tangled web of existing infrastructure, water pipes, gas lines, subway tunnels, all of which had to be carefully navigated. Every unexpected obstacle meant new delays, new redesigns, and ultimately, higher costs. We were promised a better city, but all we see are closed roads, traffic nightmares, and endless construction. How much longer is this going to take? We acknowledge the concerns, but we remain confident that the Big Dig will deliver on its promises. These challenges are expected in a project of this scale. But behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. Deadlines were being pushed further and further back. The state was under immense political pressure to keep the project moving no matter the cost. By the mid-1990s, the projected cost had already ballooned past $10 billion, nearly 4 times the original estimate. What was once seen as a bold step forward was now looking more like an economic disaster in the making. The warning signs were clear. The Big Dig was heading toward trouble. But as pressure to finish the project intensified, cutting corners and rushing solutions would lead to even bigger problems, ones that would have tragic consequences. Digging beneath one of America's oldest cities was never going to be easy. The Big Dig wasn't just a construction project, it was a feat of modern engineering unlike anything attempted before. But as work progressed, Boston's underground landscape revealed challenges that even the best engineers hadn't anticipated. One of the first major challenges was Boston's unpredictable geology. Much of the city is built on reclaimed land, meaning the soil is unstable and prone to shifting. The moment construction began, engineers realized that tunneling through this loose ground would be far more complicated than expected. To keep the tunnels from collapsing, engineers had to implement advanced reinforcement techniques, adding layers of concrete and steel supports. But every adjustment meant more time, more materials, and more money. We knew there would be challenges, but the extent of soil instability was worse than expected. Every time we thought we had a solution, another problem emerged. The water table was another major issue. Boston's underground is constantly battling moisture, which meant we had to install complex drainage systems to prevent flooding. The problems didn't stop there. As workers dug deeper, water intrusion became a nightmare. Entire sections of the tunnel had to be re-engineered to withstand the pressure, leading to skyrocketing costs. By the mid-1990s, the budget had already exceeded $10 billion, nearly 4 times the original estimate. Every setback forced new funding requests, and taxpayers were footing the bill for a project with no clear end in sight. One of the biggest financial disasters of the Big Dig was the underestimation of risk. The initial budget didn't account for the scale of engineering adjustments required. It was a classic case of overpromising and under-delivering. The project that was supposed to revolutionize Boston was now making national headlines for all the wrong reasons, but the worst was yet to come. As costs spiraled, pressure to speed up construction led to rushed decisions, ones that would have devastating consequences. What started as an ambitious infrastructure project had now become a symbol of government failure. The Big Dig wasn't just plagued by engineering challenges and cost overruns, it was also drowning in corruption, fraud, and legal battles that would shake Boston's political landscape. How did this project go from $2.6 billion to over $14 billion? Where did the money go, and who is responsible? As costs spiraled out of control, investigations uncovered shocking financial mismanagement. Contractors overbilled for work, used substandard materials, and failed to meet safety standards. Government oversight was weak, and backroom deals allowed corruption to thrive. Several major contractors faced allegations of fraud, overcharging taxpayers for materials, and even falsifying safety reports. The worst part, many of these companies continued to receive contracts despite a track record of failures. There were cases where invoices were padded, millions of dollars were spent on unnecessary expenses, and safety regulations were ignored to cut costs. It was a recipe for disaster. Public outrage grew as the extent of the corruption became clear. Citizens demanded accountability, but for years, politicians deflected responsibility. The blame game became just as chaotic as the project itself. The mismanagement of this project is unacceptable, and we are conducting a full review. But reviews did little to fix the damage. In the early 2000s, multiple lawsuits were filed against contractors and state agencies, with claims ranging from financial fraud to criminal negligence. One of the most infamous cases involved Bechtel, Parsons Brinkerhoff, the main firm overseeing the project. Accused of cost inflation, mismanagement, and cutting corners, the company eventually agreed to a $407 million settlement, but for many, it wasn't enough. This was one of the biggest infrastructure scandals in American history. The settlements barely scratched the surface of the financial waste, and many of those responsible walked away without real consequences. Even as the legal battles raged on, the tunnels were already showing signs of poor construction. Rushed work and substandard materials would soon lead to a tragic event that would forever mark the Big Dig as one of America's greatest infrastructure failures. For years, the Big Dig was ridiculed for its cost overruns and corruption. But on one tragic night in 2006, the consequences of those failures turned deadly. A mother lost her life in an instant, not because of an accident, but because the very tunnel she drove through had been built with fatal flaws. This was no random failure. Investigators discovered that the ceiling panels, each weighing several tons, had been held up by nothing more than an adhesive epoxy. Over time, that adhesive weakened, and on that fateful night, it failed completely. Inside the vehicle was 38-year-old Milena Delvale. She and her husband were on their way to Logan Airport when disaster struck. The falling concrete crushed their car instantly. Her husband survived, Milena did not. Tonight, investigators are asking how a multi-billion-dollar tunnel project could have been built with such critical safety failures. Officials are pointing fingers, but for one family, the damage is irreversible. The epoxy used to hold these panels in place was never meant to support that much weight long-term. Engineers had raised concerns, but those warnings were ignored. This was a preventable tragedy. This wasn't an isolated issue. Inspections revealed widespread safety violations, faulty bolts, weak adhesives, and mismanaged oversight. The rush to complete the project had come at the cost of public safety. She was just driving, just living her life, and then she was gone. No one should die because of government negligence. No one. In the aftermath, lawsuits were filed, executives were questioned, and millions were paid in settlements. But no amount of money could undo what happened that night. The Big Dig wasn't just a financial disaster, it was a human one. Boston was promised a safer, better future. Instead, it was left with a legacy of betrayal, broken trust, and tragedy. For decades, the Big Dig was a cautionary tale of government waste, corruption, and engineering missteps. Billions of taxpayer dollars were lost, deadlines were broken, and lives were even lost in its wake. But when we step back and look at Boston today, was the project an outright failure, or is there another side to this story? Boston today is unrecognizable from the city it was before the Big Dig. The elevated highway that once divided neighborhoods has been replaced with underground tunnels, reconnecting communities and opening up green spaces. Traffic congestion, once a daily nightmare, has improved significantly in key areas. Commute times have decreased, and the new infrastructure has helped support Boston's booming economy. The Big Dig gave Boston something invaluable: room to breathe. Without it, we'd still have an aging, overburdened highway cutting through the heart of the city. It wasn't perfect, but it was necessary. One of the biggest victories of the project: the Rose Kennedy Greenway, a space that transformed a once concrete-dominated city into a more walkable, livable place. But let's not forget the cost. Originally budgeted at $2.6 billion, the project ballooned to over $14.6 billion, 5 times the estimate. Was that price worth it? Could this have been done better, faster, and with more accountability? Yes, Boston got a modern highway system, but at an outrageous cost. Had the project been managed properly, taxpayers wouldn't still be paying for it decades later. The financial burden of the Big Dig will linger for generations. Maintenance issues still persist, and some argue that better planning could have achieved the same results at a fraction of the cost. So, was the Big Dig a failure or a success? The truth lies somewhere in between. It's a testament to both human ambition and government mismanagement, a project that changed Boston forever but came at an enormous price. In the end, the Big Dig wasn't just about tunnels and highways, it was about vision, risk, and the challenge of building something bigger than ourselves. The lessons learned here will shape how we approach mega projects for generations to come. The Boston Big Dig was one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in American history. It was a story of vision, of engineering triumph, but also of political failure, financial disaster, and tragic consequences. So, what can we learn from the Big Dig? What lessons should we carry forward to the next generation of mega projects? Lesson 1: Planning and transparency matter. The Big Dig suffered from unrealistic cost estimates and poor oversight. Future projects must prioritize honest budgeting and clear communication with the public. Lesson 2: Cutting corners can lead to catastrophe. Rushed decisions and cost-cutting measures led to structural failures, some of which were deadly. Safety must always come first. The Big Dig should serve as a case study in what not to do. But at the same time, we can't ignore the fact that it ultimately reshaped Boston for the better. And that brings us to the final lesson: even flawed projects can have lasting benefits. The Big Dig gave Boston cleaner air, a more beautiful cityscape, and a transformed transportation system. But was it worth the cost? That's a debate that continues to this day. The Big Dig's legacy is complicated. It's a reminder of both the risks and rewards of thinking big. But if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that the true measure of a project isn't just in dollars spent or years delayed. It's in the impact it leaves behind. What do you think? Was the Big Dig a disaster? Or a necessary step toward a better Boston? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more stories that shape our world.